On Chicago's South Side, gun violence is the soundtrack to these streets. This city has had a summer of senseless violence.
Deadly gun violence is surging in Chicago once again.
This also broke overnight. 5 people were shot. It happened just after a softball game.
Detectives on the scene here tonight placing down markers for what looks to be at least a dozen shell casings.
Nearly all of the victims of Chicago's gun crime are young black men. This brutal violence took the life of teenager Tonika Johnson. He was a talented athlete and he loved to dance.
It's not fair that so many black and brown kids have to worry about being shot on their way to school or on their way home from school.
The 19-year-old was shot dead 2 weeks ago at basketball practice on Chicago's South Side.
He be gunned down and he wanted nothing but good.
His death has left his best mates reeling.
It was that type of love. They stayed close together. I mean, he was a family person, and he won't be forgotten.
Tonika Johnson was a budding activist. He'd been speaking out against the gun culture that killed him. Tonika Johnson's friends are struggling to make sense of his death. Together they'd started an anti-violence group appropriately named Good Kids, Mad City.
A lot of people do think it's normal. A lot of people think that we're not gonna make it to a certain age off bat, especially because of skin tone and the others around that's greedy and want more and willing to kill to get what they want. It puts every youth in a bad position.
Even though you live in a community where there is a lot of gun violence, does it outrage you?
We have so many young people that normalize that trauma, that hear gunshots and just keep walking like it's normal. We have young people walking around, literally undiagnosed PTSD victims walking around on our streets and not having the proper services, not having the proper things in there to deal with that and to let them know that this isn't life, this is not normal. We're literally living in a war zone.
Downtown Chicago is a world away from the pockets of poverty and violence that dot its outskirts. In America's third largest metropolis, business is booming and tourists are here to see the famous Windy City.
There are 2 sides of Chicago. There's the downtown tourist attraction where everything looks nice and fine and dandy, and there's the people who are every day dealing with gun violence.
Chicago's gun crime is largely concentrated in impoverished areas to the west and south of the city. Nearly all of the 2,100 gunshot victims this year have been black, and most of the dead are young people gunned down in the prime of their lives.
Trauma is generally a disease that predominantly affects young people. Routinely, we see teenagers coming in.
Chicago's trauma centres have become some of the busiest in America.
So there was one weekend where there was maybe 40 to 50 people that were shot within a 14-hour window. You could see the fractures extending up and then over here.
I'm meeting surgeons at Mount Sinai Hospital who specialise in treating gunshot wounds.
You see that there's multiple broken bone fragments that are everywhere. This is something that we end up seeing with these high-powered weapons. I think you have to be very passionate because it's difficult work. So, you know, a day in the office, maybe doing multiple operations, talking to families about people who don't make it. It's very emotionally and physically demanding.
About 30 to 40% of our patients are affected by gun violence. And I think especially in Chicago, it's just a very specific issue that we deal with. You don't necessarily see, for example, in Australia or in other parts of the country in the United States.
Well, all our young men.
I've come to Englewood, south of Chicago, one of the neighbourhoods affected by deadly gun violence.
You were shot here as a kid, right?
Yeah, in the back there, playing with bullets and guns.
Former gang member Tyrone Muhammad got out of jail 18 months ago after serving time for murder. He's seen things get worse on these streets.
I served 21 years in prison, so sitting in that dungeon, in that concrete coffin, I got tired of seeing younger men come in, that looked like me, that was dealing with the same issues of incarceration and having no direction. Violence
has shattered this area. It was once a thriving part of Chicago. Many streets in the suburb of Englewood are deserted, and millennials have migrated away for better opportunities. Volunteers bought this block back for $1, and they're now trying to revive this street, once notorious for murders and shootings.
Because a lot of times people just assume that Englewood is just filled with criminals and people who are violent, and that is not the case. And we view ourselves as assets to the neighborhood, and we're committed to staying here and contributing to the improvement of it.
The death of Tonika Johnson has hit this community hard. This was another cold-blooded murder of a Chicago teenager trying to escape the fate of this city.
I just want peace. Heal the land. We losing too many of our babies. Every time you turn around, mamas is crying. Mamas is crying for their babies.
Tonika Johnson's friends will keep fighting for peace in Chicago.
We're fighting for youth employment. We're fighting for trauma-informed schools. We're fighting for mental health opportunities. And we can't keep putting Band-Aids over these open heart wounds.